Counselor Vexthera moved through the crystal halls of the Galactic Council building with the slow grace that came naturally to her people. Her body sparkled like living diamond as she walked, each step creating small chimes that echoed off the walls. She had been reviewing reports for the past 3 cycles, and something felt wrong. The reports from the Outer Rim territories had been getting shorter and shorter, but she could not put her finger on what was missing. She stopped at her workstation and called up the display screens. 17 different star systems appeared before her, all marked with the same symbol that meant human colonies. The Vorthok had perfect memory, and she remembered every detail from the last reports. New Terra had reported mining operations running at full capacity. Haven Colony had submitted their monthly crop yields. Darwin Station had sent detailed maintenance logs for their deep space sensors. Everything had been normal. But this cycle, there was nothing. Vexthera touched the screen with one crystalline finger and pulled up the automated systems reports. The mining equipment on New Terra was still running. The crops on Haven Colony were still growing. The sensors on Darwin Station were still scanning space. But where were the humans who operated these systems? Where were their daily reports, their maintenance requests, their complaints about supply shortages? She tried to contact the colonies directly. The communication channels opened perfectly. The automated responses came back exactly as they should. But when she asked to speak with Colony Administrator Park Sola on New Terra, the system simply said that no such person could be located. When she requested a status update from Chief Engineer Lee Jiho on Darwin Station, the same message appeared. This made no sense. Humans did not just disappear. They were many things, but they were not quiet. They talked constantly, asked questions, made requests, filed reports, and generally made their presence known in every system they inhabited. The silence from 17 colonies was more disturbing than if they had all sent distress signals. Vexthera expanded her search. She accessed the personnel databases for all human colonies in Council space. The records showed over 2 million humans living and working across 43 different systems. But when she tried to contact any of them through the standard communication networks, she got the same result. The systems worked perfectly, but the humans were simply not there. She called up the shipping manifests. Human colonies received regular supply drops every few cycles. The cargo ships had all reported successful deliveries to their destinations. The automated systems had confirmed receipt of the supplies. But no human had signed for anything or made any requests for special items. The supply ships had simply dropped their cargo at empty docks and left. Commander Quill Sean of the Quillmesh Fleet was the next person Vexthera contacted. His tentacled form appeared on her communication screen, floating in the blue-green atmosphere that his people preferred. His large eyes showed confusion when she explained what she had discovered. "Impossible," Quilljean said, his voice creating bubbles in his breathing fluid. "We have patrol ships that pass through human space every few cycles. They would have reported if entire colonies had been abandoned." "Check your patrol logs," Vexthera told him. The pause that followed lasted longer than it should have. When Quilljean spoke again, his voice was different. "The patrol ships report that all human colonies appear to be functioning normally. Infrastructure intact, automated systems operational, no signs of distress or damage. But..." He stopped. "But what?" "But the reports are very short. Usually our patrol captains write detailed observations about human activities. These reports just say that everything looks normal and nothing more." Vexthera felt something cold form in her crystal core. She had dealt with humans for over a century. They were not a species that could be ignored or overlooked. When humans were present, everyone knew it. They modified everything they touched, improved systems that had worked for thousands of years, and constantly asked questions that made other species uncomfortable. A human colony that appeared normal but produced no detailed observations was not normal at all. She accessed the employment records next. Humans worked throughout Council space, not just in their own colonies. They served as technicians on Vorthok, crystal farms, translators for Quillmesh diplomatic missions, mechanics for Hravani hive ships, and countless other positions. The records showed them all still listed as active employees. But when she tried to contact any of them, the same pattern repeated. The workplaces were functioning, but the humans were gone. Admiral Zeph Cole of the Quillmesh military appeared on her screen when she called for an emergency meeting. His green-scaled face showed the kind of irritation that came from being interrupted during sleep cycles. Counselor Vexithara, this had better be important. My fleet is preparing for exercises in the Kepler region, and I do not have time for administrative issues. 2 million humans have vanished from council space, she said simply. The irritation left Zeph Cole's face immediately. What do you mean vanished? I mean they are gone. All of them. Every human colony, every human worker, every human family. Gone. The places where they lived and worked are untouched. The systems they maintained are still running. But the humans themselves have disappeared completely. Zeph Cole was quiet for a long moment. How long ago? I do not know. The last confirmed human communications were received 3 cycles ago, but the automated systems they left behind have been sending routine reports, so it appeared that nothing had changed. This is impossible. Humans do not coordinate well enough to evacuate 2 million people without anyone noticing. They argue about everything and can barely agree on what to have for meals, let alone execute a galaxy-wide evacuation. But even as he said it, Zeph Cole was accessing his own military databases. His face grew more troubled as he read. My ships have reported normal conditions in all human territories, but you are right about the reports being strange. They are too short, too simple. When humans are involved, military reports are usually filled with complaints about human modifications to our equipment or requests for explanations about human behavior. Vexithara shared her data with him. Together they began to piece together a timeline. The last confirmed direct communication with any human had been exactly 3 cycles ago. Since then, every human territory had been operating on automated systems. The colonies were being maintained by the machines humans had built. The workplaces were continuing their functions through the processes humans had established. But not a single human had been seen or heard from anywhere in council space. How did 2 million people disappear without leaving any evidence? Zeph Cole asked. Perhaps they left evidence and we simply do not know how to see it, Vexithara replied. They called an emergency session of the full council. Representatives from all 12 founding species gathered in the great chamber that had been the center of galactic governance for over 1,000 years. The Hrvani delegates arrived in their environmental suits, their insect-like forms clicking nervously. The crystalline Vorthak sang their concerns in harmonic frequencies. The gas-form Nethys swirled in their containment fields, pulsing with colors that indicated confusion and worry. Counselor Prime Veltharion called for order. His ancient Vorthak form was larger than most, having grown for over 2,000 years. Explain this situation clearly, he demanded. Vexithara presented her findings. As she spoke, she watched the faces and forms of the other council members. She saw confusion turn to disbelief, then to worry, and finally to something approaching, fear. These were species that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. They had faced wars, natural disasters, and countless crises, but they had never faced the complete disappearance of an entire species from their territories. Have we checked their home system? Asked Counselor Merexdai of the Hrvani. Perhaps they have returned to Earth. Earth has been abandoned for over 2 centuries, Admiral Zeph Cole replied. The last humans left their homeworld when they accepted settlement rights in council space. The planet is uninhabitable now, due to the climate changes they caused before they developed space travel. Then where could 2 million people go? Veltharion demanded. Species do not simply vanish from existence. That was when Vexithara realized the most disturbing part of the whole situation. She had been thinking about this as a mystery to be solved, a problem to be fixed. But as she looked around the council chamber at the worried faces of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, she understood that they were not dealing with a disappearance at all. They were dealing with an escape. The humans had not vanished. They had left. And they had done it so quietly, so carefully, that the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had not noticed until it was already complete. 3 cycles after the emergency council session, the first systems began to fail. It started small the way disasters always did. A navigation error here, a communication delay there, minor problems that could be explained away as normal equipment issues. But Counselor Vexithera had been watching for patterns, and she saw what others missed. The hyperspace beacon network that guided ships between star systems had developed strange inconsistencies. Ships that should have taken 5 cycles to travel between systems were arriving after 7 or 8 cycles. Some were not arriving at all. The automated distress signals showed them lost in hyperspace, their crews unable to calculate proper exit coordinates. Admiral Zefkol called her with growing frustration in his voice. Half my fleet is stuck in the Andromeda sector because the navigation computers cannot plot a safe course back to base. The hyperspace math is wrong, but our best mathematicians cannot figure out what the problem is. Have you checked who programmed those navigation systems? Vexithera asked, though she already suspected the answer. The pause was longer than she expected. The systems were installed 40 years ago when we upgraded the fleet. The programming was done by human contractors. Vexithera felt her crystal body grow cold. And the maintenance? Also humans. They were the only ones who understood how the calculations worked. She accessed the transportation databases and began tracing the programming history of every major navigation system in Council space. The pattern was everywhere. Humans had not just worked on these systems, they had designed them from the ground up. The other species had provided the hardware, the raw materials, and the power sources. But the humans had written the software, programmed the computers, and trained the operators. More disturbing still, she found evidence that humans had gradually taken over maintenance duties for systems that had originally been designed by other species. The official records showed Council species as the primary engineers, but the actual work logs revealed a different story. Over the decades, humans had quietly become the ones who actually knew how everything worked. The mining operations were the next to show problems. The asteroid belts that provided rare metals for Council technology began reporting equipment failures. The massive mining platforms that could strip an asteroid bare in cycles were breaking down, and the replacement parts were not arriving on schedule. Counselor Merexdai contacted the Council with panic in her insectoid voice. The tritanium mines in the outer spiral have gone completely offline. Our technical teams cannot understand the control systems. The documentation is all written in human languages and uses concepts that our engineers find confusing. What kind of concepts? Veltharion demanded. They call them workarounds and shortcuts. The humans apparently modified every system to work in ways that the original designers never intended. Our people can follow the basic procedures, but when something goes wrong, they cannot fix it because they do not understand what the humans changed. Vexithera began to see the true scope of the problem. For 3 centuries, humans had been integrated into every level of Council civilization. They had not just been workers or servants. They had been the people who made everything actually work. While the Council species focused on grand strategies and political decisions, humans had been quietly keeping the lights on. The communication networks were failing next. Ships trying to contact their home bases were getting static or no response at all. The translation systems that allowed different species to understand each other were producing garbled messages. Trade negotiations between species that had communicated perfectly for centuries were breaking down due to misunderstandings. She traced the problem to its source and found what she expected. Humans had not just operated the translation systems, they had designed them. More than that, they had served as interpreters and mediators between species whose languages and thought patterns were completely incompatible. Without humans to bridge the gap, species that had worked together for hundreds of years were discovering that they could barely communicate with each other. Commander Quilshawn sent an emergency message that made Vexithera's fears concrete. We have a crisis in the trade systems. The automated cargo handling on Station 7 has malfunctioned, and we cannot figure out how to fix it. Worse, we discovered that most of our trade agreements were negotiated by human mediators. Without them to explain the terms, we are having disputes with our partners over contracts that we all thought we understood. The financial networks were showing problems too. The complex calculations that managed currency exchange between different species were producing incorrect results. Trade routes that had been profitable for decades were suddenly losing money, but no one could figure out why. The algorithms that managed interspecies commerce had been maintained by humans, and without them, the galactic economy was starting to collapse. Within 10 cycles of the human disappearance, 3 major shipping companies had gone bankrupt. 2 mining consortiums had shut down their operations. The hyperspace navigation network had so many problems that civilian travel between systems was becoming dangerous. But the worst discovery came when Vexithara tried to access the Council's own internal systems. The databases that contained centuries of laws, treaties, and administrative records were all functioning, but they were impossible to update. Every time someone tried to add new information or modify existing records, the systems would freeze or produce error messages. She called in the Council's best technical experts. The Vorthak engineers studied the crystal-based memory systems. The Quillmesh technicians examined the bio-neural networks. The Hravani specialists analyzed the quantum processors. All of them reached the same conclusion. The systems work perfectly for retrieving information, reported the lead Vorthak engineer. But the modification protocols are locked behind security systems that we cannot understand. The documentation refers to adaptive authentication procedures and contextual authorization matrices that make no sense to us. Who designed these security systems? Veltharion asked, though they all already knew. Human security contractors. They claimed the systems would be more secure if they were designed using human intuition and psychology, rather than purely logical approaches. Vexithara realized that the humans had not just quietly left. They had quietly locked the door behind them. Every critical system in Council space was designed to work perfectly as long as no one tried to change anything. But the moment the Council needed to adapt to new circumstances, the systems would fail. The pattern was so consistent that it could not be accidental. Humans had spent centuries making themselves indispensable while appearing to be nothing more than helpful workers. They had gradually taken over maintenance, upgrades, and modifications of every important system. They had written the software, trained the operators, and designed the security protocols. Most importantly, they had done it all using human thinking patterns that other species found difficult to follow. The documentation they left behind was technically complete but practically useless. It was like leaving a perfectly detailed map written in a language that only humans could read. Admiral Zefkol convened an emergency military briefing. His tentacles moved with agitation as he spoke. We need to face the reality of our situation. We are not dealing with a labor shortage. We are dealing with systemic dependence on a species that has chosen to abandon us. Abandoned us? Counselor Murextai clicked her mandibles angrily. We gave them homes, work, and citizenship in our civilization. How is accepting our generosity the same as us depending on them? Because, Vexithara said quietly, they were never working for us. They were working to keep everything running despite us. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The humans had not been grateful servants or junior partners in Council civilization. They had been the maintenance crew for a society that could not maintain itself. And now they were gone. Ships were lost in hyperspace. Mining operations sat idle. Communication networks failed daily. The currency markets were in chaos. The legal systems could not be updated. Even the food distribution networks that fed billions of Council citizens were starting to break down. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were discovering that their technology was only as good as their ability to understand it. And without humans to bridge the gap between what was designed and what was needed, everything was falling apart. Veltharion called for a full Council emergency session. As the representatives gathered, Vexithara looked around the great chamber and realized that they were not just facing a crisis. They were facing the revelation that their entire civilization had been built on foundations they did not understand, maintained by people they had taken for granted, and designed by minds that thought in ways they could not follow. The humans had not just left. They had revealed that the Council had never really been in control of their own civilization. The largest search operation in galactic history began 15 cycles after the human exodus was discovered. Admiral Zefkol commanded a fleet of over 3,000 ships from all 12 Council species. Their mission was simple in concept, but impossible in practice. Find 2 million missing humans and bring them back before Council civilization collapsed completely. Vexithera had been assigned as the chief analyst for the search. Her crystal form had grown dimmer over the past cycles as the stress of the crisis affected her people's natural luminescence. She stood in the command center of the flagship, surrounded by displays showing the locations of every known human settlement, workplace, and facility in Council space. Begin with the Outer Rim territories, she instructed the search teams. The humans disappeared from there first, so there may be more evidence of how they accomplished their evacuation. The first search team reported back from New Terra within hours. Commander Yulsek of the Hravani spoke through his translator, Unit, his insect-like features showing confusion. The colony is completely intact. All buildings, all equipment, all infrastructure remains exactly as it should be. But there are no signs of hasty departure or struggle. It appears that the humans simply ceased to exist at a specific moment in time. Have you found any transportation records? Vexithara asked. That is the strangest part. The spaceport logs show no unusual ship departures in the past 20 cycles. The cargo manifests are all routine. The passenger lists show only normal commercial traffic. But somehow, 17,000 humans managed to leave this planet without using any of the available transportation. Vexithara felt a chill in her crystal core. Check the ship registration databases. Look for any vessels that might have been acquired by humans in the cycles before their disappearance. The data that came back made the mystery deeper. Humans had indeed been purchasing ships, but not the kind that would be suitable for mass evacuation. They had been buying old cargo haulers, worn-out mining vessels, and decommissioned military transports. The ships were too small and too few to account for the movement of 2 million people. More disturbing still, many of these ships had been purchased using funds that the humans should not have had access to. The financial records showed complex transactions involving currency exchanges, commodity trades, and investment profits that suggested the humans had been planning and saving for their departure for decades. Commander Quiljean led a team to Darwin Station, one of the most important deep space monitoring facilities in Council space. His report was even more puzzling. The station is fully operational. All sensors are working perfectly, and the automated systems are still collecting data about hyperspace traffic throughout this sector. But we found something unusual in the personnel quarters. What kind of unusual? Admiral Zefkol asked. The humans left detailed instruction manuals for every system on the station. Not just the basic operational procedures that were already in the databases, but comprehensive guides that explain how to troubleshoot problems, modify systems for new requirements, and perform maintenance that was previously done only by humans. Vexithera requested copies of these manuals. When she examined them, she found something that made her more worried than ever. The manuals were incredibly detailed and technically accurate. They would allow non-human technicians to maintain the station systems indefinitely. But they were written in such a way that only someone with extensive technical background could understand them. They are not trying to make it impossible for us to maintain their systems, she realized. They are making it possible, but only for people who are willing to learn how the systems actually work, rather than just following basic procedures. The search teams found similar manuals at every human facility. The humans had not sabotaged anything or taken critical components with them. Instead, they had left behind everything needed to continue operations, but in a form that required real understanding rather than simple routine. It was like leaving a perfectly maintained garden with detailed instructions on how to care for every plant, but writing those instructions for master gardeners rather than casual observers. The search expanded to the commercial sectors where humans had worked. Counselor Murexdai accompanied a team to the Kepler trading hub, where humans had managed cargo logistics for the entire sector. Her report sent new waves of concern through the council. The humans did not just disappear from their jobs, they trained replacements. We found evidence that they had been quietly teaching selected non-human workers how to perform critical tasks. The problem is that they trained only 1 or 2 individuals for each position, And those individuals are now overwhelmed trying to handle work that was previously done by dozens of humans. More pieces of the puzzle emerged as the search continued. At research facilities, humans had uploaded massive amounts of data to the central databases in the cycles before their disappearance. At manufacturing plants, they had optimized production, schedules to run automatically for extended periods. At transportation hubs, they had programmed routing systems to handle routine traffic without human intervention. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. The human exodus had been planned for years, possibly decades. They had gradually reduced their own importance in daily operations while maintaining their critical role in system design and maintenance. When they left, they had ensured that everything would continue working, but only for a limited time. The breakthrough came when searching teams examined the communication networks that humans had used for their personal correspondence. Most of the data had been wiped clean, but Quillmesh technicians with specialized equipment were able to recover fragments of messages. The fragments were cryptic, but revealing. References to Phase 1 completion and Transport Protocol 7 and Rendezvous at the Silent Garden. Most intriguingly, several messages mentioned someone named Kim Yuna as a coordination point for major decisions. "Find this Kim Yuna," Veltharion ordered. "She may be the key to understanding how they organized this exodus." The search for Kim Yuna revealed that she had been a low-level administrative worker at a minor trading post in the Outer Spiral. Her official records showed nothing unusual: standard employment history, normal residential patterns, and routine communication logs. But when they examined her work more closely, a different picture emerged. Kim Yuna had been in communication with humans across the entire galaxy. She had requested information about shipping schedules, system maintenance protocols, and resource availability from dozens of different facilities. Individually, her requests had appeared to be normal administrative inquiries. Collectively, they had given her complete knowledge of Council space infrastructure. More importantly, she had been sharing information in return. Her outgoing messages had carried technical solutions, operational improvements, and coordination instructions to humans throughout the galaxy. She had been running an invisible network that connected human workers in every sector of Council space. The search teams found evidence of similar networks centered around other humans in key positions. Bei Taemin had been coordinating transportation resources. Park Dongyun had been managing technical information sharing. Oh Minji had been handling financial transactions. Together, they had created a shadow organization that operated within Council space but remained completely invisible to Council oversight. They were never really citizens of our civilization, Admiral Zefkol concluded grimly. They were an occupying force that chose to be helpful rather than hostile. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. As search teams examined human facilities more thoroughly, they found evidence of advanced technology that did not appear in any Council databases. Hidden laboratories with equipment that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Communication, devices that could send messages instantaneously across galactic distances. Transportation systems that appeared to move objects without using conventional hyperspace. The humans had not just been maintaining Council technology, they had been advancing it in ways that the Council species had never imagined possible. Vexathera stood in her laboratory examining samples of human technology that search teams had recovered. The crystalline matrix that powered one device was unlike anything in Vorthak science. The bio-neural interface that controlled another was beyond Quillmesh biotechnology. The quantum processors that managed a third were more advanced than Hravani electronics. They were not just keeping our civilization running, she whispered to herself. They were advancing it beyond what we thought possible, and we never even noticed. The final piece of evidence came from the very edge of Council space. An automated monitoring station that had been operated by humans had been broadcasting a repeating message on frequencies that Council communication systems could barely detect. The message was simple, but chilling. Phase 3 initiated. The Gardeners are withdrawing. Observation protocols remain in effect. Garden status will be evaluated at specified intervals. The humans had not just left. They were still watching. And they were judging whether the garden they had tended for 3 centuries could survive without them. 6 months had passed since the search operation began, and galactic civilization was crumbling faster than anyone had anticipated. Vexithara stood in the council chamber watching Councilor Prime Veltharion struggle to maintain order as representatives. From across council space reported system failures, economic collapses and social unrest on hundreds of worlds. The Hravani sectors had lost most of their mining operations. The complex chemical processes that extracted rare metals from asteroids had stopped working when the automated systems developed problems that no one knew how to fix. Councilor Mirex Dai's mandibles clicked frantically as she spoke. Our people are rioting because they believe the shortages are artificial. They cannot understand how systems that worked perfectly for centuries can simply stop functioning. The Quilmesh military was in worse shape. Admiral Zefkol's fleet was stranded in various systems across the galaxy because the hyperspace navigation networks had become too unreliable for safe travel. Ships that attempted long-distance jumps were arriving at random coordinates or disappearing entirely. We have lost contact with 47 vessels in the past month alone, he reported. My commanders are refusing to authorize any non-essential travel. But the crisis went deeper than technology failures. The social systems that had held Council civilization together were breaking down as well. Without human translators and mediators, old conflicts between species were resurging. Trade disputes that had been settled for generations were erupting into economic warfare. Diplomatic agreements that had seemed rock solid were being reinterpreted in ways that led to hostility and mistrust. Vexithara had been studying the patterns of system failures, and she had reached a conclusion that terrified her. The humans did not just maintain our technology, she announced to the assembled council. They maintained our society. They were the invisible force that made cooperation between our species possible. Impossible, declared Councilor Thexivor of the crystalline Nethys. His gaseous form pulsed with colors of indignation. We have been cooperating for over 1,000 years. Our species learned to work together through wisdom and enlightened self-interest. Have we? Vexithara challenged. When was the last time any of us successfully negotiated a complex agreement with another species without human assistance? When? Did any of our species last solve a technical problem by working directly with specialists from other cultures? The silence that followed was telling. The council members began to realize that for centuries, humans had been present at every important negotiation, every technical collaboration, and every diplomatic resolution. They had seemed like helpful staff taking notes and managing logistics, but they had actually been the ones making communication and cooperation possible. The revelation became undeniable when Vexithara presented her analysis of historical records. Every major agreement between council species had been drafted with human assistance. Every successful joint project had included human coordinators. Every peaceful resolution of conflicts had involved human mediators. They were never our servants, she continued. They were our caretakers, and we were too arrogant to notice. That was when the message arrived. It came through communication channels that should not have been able to reach the council chamber. The transmission bypassed every security system and appeared directly on the main display screen. The image showed a human male in his middle years, with the kind of calm confidence that came from complete understanding of a complex situation. My name is Bay Taman, the human said in perfect council standard language. I speak for the human diaspora. We have been monitoring the deterioration of your civilization, and we believe it is time for direct communication. The council chamber erupted in voices from 12 different species, all demanding answers at the same time. Veltharion's harmonic frequency cut through the noise, calling for order. You will explain where your people have gone and when they will return to restore our systems. Bai Taman's expression did not change. Our people have not gone anywhere. We have simply stopped pretending to be part of your civilization. As for restoration, that depends entirely on whether you are capable of learning from this experience. Learning what? Admiral Zefkol demanded. We provided you with homes and opportunities across the galaxy. We welcomed you into our society and gave you meaningful work. What more did you expect? We expected you to notice that your society could not function without us, Bai Taman replied. For 3 centuries, we maintained your technology, mediated, your conflicts and solved the problems that your species could not solve for yourselves. We hoped that eventually you would recognize our contributions and treat us as equals rather than useful servants. Vexithara felt her crystal form grow cold as she understood the implications. You have been testing us. Not testing. Waiting. We gave you centuries to demonstrate that you could evolve beyond the arrogance that made you treat an entire species as a support staff. Instead, you became more dependent on us, while remaining convinced of your own superiority. Counselor Marexdai's voice was sharp with anger. If you wanted respect, you should have demanded it instead of manipulating us through deception. We did not deceive you, Baytamen answered. We simply did the work that needed to be done while you took credit for the results. Every system we built transparently. Every process we managed, we documented thoroughly. Every problem we solved using methods that any of your species could have learned. You chose not to pay attention. The human's image leaned forward slightly. But the real issue is not what you failed to notice about us. The real issue is what you failed to notice about yourselves. What do you mean? Veltharion asked. Your civilization is dying, Baytamen said simply. Not because we left, but because it was already dying when we arrived. The systems that maintain stellar stability in this galaxy are failing. The natural processes that regulate hyperspace are breaking down. The cosmic infrastructure that makes life possible is deteriorating. The council chamber fell completely silent. This was information that none of them had possessed. We discovered this within 50 years of joining your civilization. We tried to bring it to your attention through official channels. Your scientists dismissed our findings as primitive human speculation. Your leaders told us to focus on practical matters and leave cosmic theory to our betters. Vexthara accessed her memory files and found records of exactly the reports Baytamen was describing. Human researchers had submitted papers about stellar instability patterns and hyperspace deterioration. The papers had been filed in databases and ignored. So we stopped asking for permission and started working on solutions ourselves, the human continued. Everything we built, every system we improved, every process we optimized, was designed to buy time while we developed the technology needed to save this galaxy. Save it from what? Admiral Zefkol asked. Complete collapse within the next 2 centuries. The ancient machines that regulate galactic stability were built by civilizations that disappeared millions of years ago. They are breaking down, and no one in council space has the technology to repair them. No one except us. The displays around the council chamber suddenly filled with data that none of them had ever seen before. Star charts showing patterns of instability. Hyperspace maps revealing structural damage, energy readings indicating the failure of massive systems that spanned entire sectors of the galaxy. We have spent the past 3 centuries developing the technology and infrastructure needed to prevent galactic collapse, Baytamen explained. We have built the tools and trained the people and prepared the resources, but we will not use them to save a civilization that refuses to acknowledge our value. Counselor Thexfor pulsed with angry colors. You would allow billions of innocent beings to die to make a political point? We would allow billions of arrogant beings to face the consequences of their choices, Baytamen corrected. You have had 3 centuries to evolve beyond the attitudes that made you treat us as inferior. You have chosen not to change. Now you will discover whether you can survive the results of that choice. The transmission began to fade, but Baytamen's final words came through clearly. We will give you one more chance to prove that your civilization deserves to survive. The choice is yours. The screen went dark, leaving the council in stunned silence. They were facing not just the high collapse of their technology and society, but the end of their galaxy itself, and their survival depended on convincing a species they had never respected to use technology they did not understand, to save a civilization they could not maintain. Vexithara looked around the chamber at the faces of the most powerful beings in known space and realized that for the first time in galactic history, they were all completely powerless. 1 year after the human exodus began, Counselor Prime Veltharion stood alone in the great chamber where galactic civilization had been governed for over 1,000 years. The crystal walls that had once hummed with harmonic frequencies were silent. Most of the other council members had returned to their home worlds to deal with the collapse of their individual civilizations. The proud Galactic Council had been reduced to a single desperate old Vorthak, trying to save what remained of their universe. The situation had deteriorated beyond anyone's worst predictions. Entire star systems were now experiencing stellar instabilities that made space travel impossible. The hyperspace network had collapsed so completely that most worlds were cut off from any contact with the rest of the galaxy. On planets across Council space, billions of beings were facing shortages of everything from basic food supplies to the exotic materials needed to maintain life support systems. Vexithara entered the chamber carrying the final reports from the beam monitoring stations that were still functional. Her crystal form had lost most of its luminescence, reflecting the exhaustion and despair that had consumed her people. "The situation in the core worlds is critical," she informed Veltharion. 3 more star systems have reported solar flare activity that is disrupting all electronics. The evacuation ships cannot reach them because the hyperspace routes have become too unstable. Veltharion's ancient form resonated with frequencies of deep sadness. "How many worlds have we lost contact with completely?" "Over 400 in the past month alone. The communication networks are failing faster than we can repair them, and we do not have enough qualified technicians to maintain even basic services." The irony was bitter. The Council species had created the most advanced technological civilization in galactic history, but they had done it by relying on human knowledge and human workers. Without humans to maintain and improve their systems, they were discovering that their technology was far more fragile than they had ever imagined. Admiral Zefkol's latest report had been particularly devastating. Of the 3,000 ships that had begun the search for the missing humans, fewer than 500 were still operational. The rest had been lost to hyperspace accidents, mechanical failures that could not be repaired, or simple abandonment when their crews could no longer figure out how to make critical systems work. But the worst part was the knowledge that their suffering was unnecessary. The humans were still out there, still watching, still capable of saving everyone. They had simply chosen not to intervene while the Council species proved unable to learn from their mistakes. That was when the second message arrived. Like the first transmission from Bay Taman, it bypassed all security systems and appeared directly on the chamber's main display. This time the image showed a human woman with the kind of quiet authority that came from managing impossible situations. "Name is Minji," she said. "I have been authorized to make a final offer on behalf of humanity." Veltharion and Vexithara moved closer to the display, knowing that this might be their last chance to save their civilizations. "We have monitored the collapse of your systems and the suffering of your people," Minji continued. "We take no satisfaction in your difficulties. We are not cruel, and we do not wish to see innocents suffer for the arrogance of their leaders." "Then help us," Veltharion pleaded. "We acknowledge that we underestimated your contributions to our civilization. We are prepared to offer you any position, any authority, any compensation you require." Minji's expression remained steady. "You still do not understand. We do not want positions in your civilization. We want you to build a civilization that does not require us to maintain it for you." She gestured, and the display filled with images of massive construction projects taking place in the void beyond the galactic rim. Artificial structures the size of planets, energy collectors that dwarfed anything in Council space, and transportation networks that seemed to operate on principles that defied known physics. "We have spent this year building the infrastructure needed to save this galaxy," Minji explained. "We have the technology to repair the ancient systems that maintain stellar stability. We can rebuild the hyperspace network. We can restore the cosmic infrastructure that makes life possible on billions of worlds." The images showed human engineering on a scale that made Council achievements look primitive by comparison. Cities floating in interstellar space, machines that could manipulate the fundamental forces of physics, transportation systems that could move entire populations across galactic distances in cycles rather than years. "But we will not simply fix your problems and return to our previous role as your invisible maintenance staff," Minji stated firmly. "If we save this galaxy, It will be under terms that prevent the situation we just experienced from ever happening again. What terms? Vexithara asked, though she suspected she would not like the answer. Complete governmental and technological integration between all species, Ominji replied. No more council species ruling over client species. No more assumption that some civilizations are naturally superior to others. No more dependence on any single group to maintain systems that everyone relies on. She paused to let that sink in. Every species will contribute according to their abilities. Every species will benefit according to their needs. And every species will understand how the systems they depend on actually work. Beltharian's harmonic frequencies showed confusion and concern. You are asking us to abandon the governmental structure that has maintained galactic peace for over 1,000 years. We are asking you to abandon the governmental structure that only maintained peace because we were secretly holding it together, Ominji corrected. The system you thought was working was actually completely dependent on human intervention at every level. The display changed to show detailed analyses of council governance over the past 3 centuries. Every major decision, every successful negotiation, every peaceful resolution had involved human participation in ways that the council had never recognized. Humans had not just been translating languages, they had been translating concepts between species whose minds worked in completely different ways. Your 1,000 years of peace was actually 300 years of peace maintained by human mediation, built on top of 700 years of conflict and instability, Ominji continued. Without us, you revert to your natural state of mutual incomprehension and competition. Vexithara felt her crystal structure resonating with the truth of this statement. In the years since the humans had left, old conflicts had resurged with shocking speed. Species that had cooperated peacefully were now viewing each other with suspicion and hostility. Diplomatic agreements that had seemed permanent were being abandoned or reinterpreted in ways that served narrow self-interest rather than mutual benefit. What you are proposing sounds like human dominance disguised as cooperation, Admiral Zefkol's voice came through the communication system. He was speaking from his stranded flagship, but his transmission was clear enough to convey his skepticism. What we are proposing is actual cooperation instead of the illusion of cooperation that you have been living with, Ominji replied. We will not dominate this new civilization any more than any other species will, but we will also not allow any species to dominate it, including yours. The image changed again, showing detailed plans for a new form of galactic governance. Instead of a council of ruling species making decisions for client species, there would be integrated committees with representatives from every world. Instead of each species maintaining separate territories, there would be mixed communities where different species lived and worked together. Instead of some species providing labor while others provided leadership, every species would contribute their unique abilities to shared projects. This is impossible, Beltharian protested. Our species have fundamental differences in biology, psychology, and social organization. We cannot simply merge our civilizations. You cannot merge your current civilizations, Ominji agreed. But you can build a new civilization that incorporates the best aspects of all your cultures while eliminating the problems that made your old system unsustainable. She gestured, and the display showed images of the human communities that had been built beyond the galactic rim. Cities where different species lived in integrated neighborhoods designed to accommodate everyone's needs. Workplaces where teams of mixed species collaborated on projects using their complementary abilities. Schools where young beings from all species learned together using teaching methods that worked for different types of minds. We have been testing these concepts in our own communities, Ominji explained. We know they work because we have made them work. The final image showed a vast machine complex surrounding a dying star, with human engineers working alongside members of every council species to repair the ancient systems that regulated stellar output. The cooperation was so natural and efficient that it was hard to believe the same species had been unable to communicate effectively just months before. The choice is yours, Ominji concluded. Accept our terms and help us build a civilization that can survive and prosper for millions of years. Or continue trying to maintain your old system until the galaxy collapses around you.